Well, howdy, welcome aboard. Hello, I guess. Um, Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, whatever you like. This is going to be a Christmas cross country. It's not going to be overtly Christmassy, other than the time of year at which I'm recording it. But the route is the interesting thing. We are going to the North Pole. No, we're not. We're going to Fort Macleod. Now, I have chosen this route for one reason and one reason alone, and that is because I have flown this route in real life when I did my solo cross country a few weeks back. Because for those who didn't know, I am a student pilot at this very moment, which is why I'm gonna try and do this at least somewhat by the book. I'm gonna navigate pretty much purely by landmarks because it's pretty easy to get there. But we've got a bit of a trip ahead of us, so let's start it up. So we've got our headset plugged in. Yes. We've got our sunglasses on. We'll remove the wheel chocks, remove the tie downs, remove the engine heater, remove the pitot cover, and we will go into a walk around. So, pitot tube cover, I already removed. Pilot's operating handbook, rights are, is in the aircraft. Weight and balance. Well, it's just me and a ton of fuel. So that should be all good. Parking brake is set. I've noticed in the real aircraft, at least in my experience, we don't use the parking brake too much, and especially not in the winter. But anyway, control wheel lock is removed, ignition is off, avionics are off, battery master is going on, pitot heat. No, I don't have that set up. Pitot heat's going on. Fuel quantity, the fuel gauge in this particular instance of the A2A C172 is not working at the moment, so that's all good. But we know we have enough fuel because and we're gonna check the quantity in the actual tank, so it's all good. Avionics are going on, and they're functional, and the cooling fan appears to be running, so that's good. I'm going to sneeze, pardon me. The alternate static source valve is off, and the annunciator panel is tested. Okay, and only the appropriate lights have remained illuminated. We'll just, we'll be happy with that. Fuel selector, both fuel shutoff valve is off. Flaps. Now, typically you don't want to extend the flaps for the walk around in the winter because it will drain the battery quite a lot, so we're actually not going to do that. We will turn the pitot heat off, the avionics master off, the master switch off, and set the elevator trim for takeoff. So, just peeking outside, we'll make sure that pitot tube is warm to the touch. We could be flying into icing today, probably not, but we might, so we do want to make sure that that the heat is working. We'll check our connections to the elevators and to the rudder, and we'll jiggle the trim tab. And we can't jiggle the flaps because we didn't extend them, but we can have a look at the connections and make sure that's all good. We can actually check these right here. The aileron hinges are all good. There's nothing obviously missing there. The tie down is removed. The chocks are removed, and quite often when you'd come around here, you might sort of kick the tire to push it forward with your foot to make sure it's rolling correctly and make sure that there's nothing obviously wrong with the wheel. We will sample the fuel, and it's clear and blue, so we don't have anything to worry about. And we have plenty of fuel in the tanks. This is only going to be about a half-hour flight. Oil, why is it white? I ran this earlier today, and it was okay, but I think I need to put different oil in now that it's getting colder, actually, come to think of it. Yeah, I will address that later. We have plenty of fuel in the other tank. And sampling it's clear and blue. Wheels okay. The tie down is removed. The stall warning horn appears to be unobstructed. If you really wanted to, you could suck on the bloody thing to try and set it off. I don't recommend it. There could be a bug in there. And this thing, I still don't know what this is. Is not blocked. Actually, come to think of it. Oh, fuel tank vent opening. That makes sense. Okay. Aileron hinges are okay, and flaps. Whoops. Flaps are all good. And we are back in here, and the windows have completely fogged over, but that's okay. I'll actually crack the window so that maybe that'll clear, and we'll get the defroster on once we're in. So, before starting engine, pre-flight inspection complete, passenger briefing, sit down, shut up, and don't touch anything. Seats and seat belts, adjust and locked. Well, I mean, there's not much I can do about that. It's a simulator. Brakes are tested and set. Circuit breakers are in. I don't think they're actually simulated in the A2A C172, although I could be wrong. Oh no, they are. Okay. I don't know to what degree they are, but anyway. Avionics master is off. Fuel valve, both. Fuel shutoff valve is in. And avionics circuit breakers are in. Yeah. So, to start this thing, it's a bit different from the ones I've been flying, because the ones I've been flying in the real world are 172Ns, which are not fuel injected. This one is. So, we will open the throttle about 1/4 of an inch. Mixture will be at idle cutoff. Propeller area. You just open the window and scream, "Clear!" And then probably close it, actually, because you don't want that flying around when the engine starts. Then we will turn the master on. Beacon is on. Typically, you can just leave that on so it goes on and off with the master switch, because you always want that on. And auxiliary fuel pump will go on. We'll enrich the mixture. We'll watch for fuel flow. Go 1, 2, and then retard the mixture and turn off the fuel pump. And that should prime the engine, although I cannot see crap. So, I think we're good to start. So, hang on to your butts. And she lives! And oil pressure light is out, and oil pressure is coming up, which is good. You want to have that up more or less immediately, otherwise you could have some engine damage. So, oil pressure is good. Navigation lights we won't need. Electrical system, I won't bother testing it, because I'm not being a good person. Avionics are going on, and all that. Radios. So local traffic frequency is going to be 123.00, so that's all good. I'm not actually going to use ATC, but I will be saying the, well, more or less correct radio communications. And what are we going to do for our run-up? So the wind, we want to be turning into the wind to do our engine run-up, which I am actually going to do. So I am essentially just going to make a big old turn. Because, in fact, the spot where you're technically supposed to do the run-up at this apron is actually pretty much right here, although I don't think the line is there in this lovely ORBX scenery. I'll go over all the add-ons I'm using once we're in the air, because, well, I need some time. So, parking brake is set, passenger seat backs, most upright position, seatbelt secure, cabin doors closed and locked, flight controls. Free and correct. I didn't bother to check the ailerons. Let's pop outside and do that. Because I'm not using track IR, I can't peek out the window so easily. Flight instruments. We'll just check the heading indicator against the magnetic compass. And that's all good. Set the altimeter. The altitude here is 3,431 feet. And everything else looks good. So flight instruments are set. Fuel quantity is fine. Mixture is rich. Fuel selector valve is on both. And we'll run up to 1800 RPM. In the N models we only do 1700, but we're not going to do that. And what I'm actually going to do first is lean the mixture. And I'm just going to lean it until we get an RPM drop. And then we'll enrich it. So there's our drop, and we're back up. And now we'll do our mag check. So we'll go to right, drop about 50 RPM left, drop about 70 RPM back to both. So nothing that's going to keep us from flying today. Plugs will probably clear up once we take off. Vacuum gauge. My bloody vacuum. Oh, it's right here. So vacuum is good, engine instruments, and ammeter. So how we would check the ammeter is actually turn on all manner of electric things, and if it basically doesn't move, then we're good. We're only going to leave the beacon light on because this is Canada. We don't really care about lights very much. Well, officially by regulations anyway. So we'll check idle for the throttle, and if it bottoms out without quitting, we're good. As indeed it has. So we'll go back up to 1000 RPM to keep from fouling the plugs. So throttle 1000 RPM, throttle friction lock. You can't adjust it in the aircraft, but I'm using the Cytec X55 throttle, which does have a friction lock. So I will set it. And strobe lights, we won't need. Radios and avionics. Radios are where we want. I'll go ahead and set the transponder to ALT now. Nav, GPS, we won't be using. I'll be navigating purely by landmarks. Autopilot is off. Elevator trim set for takeoff. Flaps are set. And we'll release the brakes and taxi. And at this point we might pipe up on the radio and say something like... However, traffic, Yankee Victor Juliet is taxiing to hold short of runway 07. Now in this scenery it's called 06, but in the real world it's called 07. And while we're on this little taxiway here, I'll do a rolling instrument check. So we turn to the right, turn coordinator, ball to the left, heading increasing, ADI steady, compass floating, ball to the right, heading decreasing, ADI steady, compass floating. And we'll stop and hold short, and we'll do a quick traffic check. I'm not using AI traffic, but for the sake of accuracy, so we look to be clear on the left and clear on the right, so we're all good. We might pipe up on the radio and say, hi over traffic, Yankee Victor Juliet is lining up runway 07. And as we enter, we would make sure our transponder's set, that the magnetic compass, or that the heading indicator is set correctly by the compass, and that there's nothing obviously wrong. And we'll wait for the weather injection to happen, because that's another add-on that I will be explaining once we're in the air. Alright, that's complete. And we're good to go. So, higher over traffic, Yankee Victor Juliet, rolling runway 07. Actually, I'm going to reduce this volume slightly just to make sure you can hear me. I did run an audio test earlier to make sure I was vaguely audible, but I just want to be sure. Visibility does not look very good. This could be an interesting flight. 55 knots, and she pops up into the air like nothing. Which is good, so we'll hold a little bit of right rudder because we've got a bit of crosswind component. And we'll trim to maintain 70 knots in the climb. And we're going to go ahead and climb to 1000 AGL, and then we're going to do an overhead departure and set our heading directly over the airfield so it's a good landmark. Oh, good griefs. Yeah, visibility is really not good. This is going to be very interesting. I don't know if we're even legal for visibility for VFR, but it's a simulator, so we're not going to worry about it. And we can increase that angle of climb because 70 knots is our best rate speed. And passing through 4,000 feet, we might mention on the radio, like Yankee Victor Juliet airborne runway 07. And we're good. Climbing. So essentially what we're actually going to do is follow the number 2 highway, which runs pretty much right to our destination, or at least it'll carry us close enough to be able to see it. And it also takes us in more or less a straight line. So now we get on the radio and say, harbor traffic, Yankee Victor Juliet, leaving circuit height, climbing 5,500, and maybe let them know vaguely where we're going, climbing for overhead departure, blah, 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 blah. And we will climb to 5,500 feet. Because for VFR, you do, well, in this case, we're heading a little bit to the east. We're heading sort of southeast. So if we're heading to the east, we use odd-numbered altitudes, plus 500 feet for VFR. You only have to abide by those if you're above 3,000 AGL, but it's generally good practice to do it even if you're below that, which is what we're going to do. And we will climb around beside the aerodrome. I'm using real world weather, by the way, so this is what it's like right now at the time that I'm recording this. So, yeesh. I might actually have to use a GPS. I hope not, because I don't know if I actually remember the identifier for Fort Macleod, but I can't even see the bloody airport. Where'd it go? Should be back there somewhere. Yeah, I'm gonna use the GPS. Let's turn it on. Uh-oh. GPS battery. There we go. Okay. Now I know what I'm doing, and I'm making a rather steep turn, which I should not be doing. And we smashed right through our cruising altitude. Good grief, you'd get the idea I'm some kind of incompetent. But don't worry, I blame the visibility. Where's the airport? Just about directly ahead. Okay. And now that we're at our cruise height, we'll just ease the power back to 2300 RPM, which is going to be our cruise setting. Which is a pretty fast cruise setting, but we actually want to bloody get there, so it's all good. And now, we're going to be crossing... Where's the bloody field? Oh, there it is. So now that we're more or less directly over the field, we're a little bit to the east, but it's no big thing. We will set our heading, we'll trim for cruise, and we'll be off. Okay. What's this airport I'm seeing over here? Alright. The lack of visibility is making it a little weird. All things considered, hopefully we fly out of this. We probably will. I did not check the weather because professionalism, or lack thereof. And actually, now that we're in cruise, we'll make sure that our oil temperature and pressure are still good, and we're actually going to lean the mixture. So there's a drop in RPM, we'll feed it back in. And as you can see, we're still more or less above that number 2 highway. We kind of want to keep it in sight, but I'm mostly actually going to be navigating by GPS now, so I'm sorry to cheat, but that's just how it's going to have to be. But what I am going to do is consult my actual paper chart, because, so Fort Macleod, good grief. Fort Macleod, what is the identifier for Fort Macleod? Is it, no. No. Ha! I don't know what it is. That's not good. And I don't have a copy of the Canada Flight Supplement handy, so I can't look it up. So what I'll do is zoom out. No, I won't. This might be a little bit of a mess, but that's okay. It's Christmas. Well, not yet. And we're descending. What's that about? You know what? I'm actually going to engage the autopilot while I try to figure this out. Set heading. Set altitude. And I'm going to consult my chart. Because Fort Macleod. Fort Macleod, Fort Macleod, Fort Macleod. Elevation 3,138 feet. Traffic frequency. Oh yeah, now that we're clear of the zone of high river, we're going to switch over to the VFR en route frequency, which is 126.70. And we'll dial the Fort Macleod frequency into our standby, which is going to be 123.2. Fort Macleod. I'm going to consult my GPS. CAJ7. Okay, so we're passing Kaylee on the left, which is good. That's a familiar landmark. I've never actually landed there in reality, but I have in the simulator. CFT2. What about nearest? Maybe it'll come back to me if I see it on this list. Yeah. Nearest. Nearest airport. Yeah. No, I don't want to go to Kaylee. Charlie Echo X-Ray 9. No. Okay. I know vaguely the direction that we're gonna go in, but, okay. I'm not familiar with this GPS. Ah! There we go. Where's that number 2 highway? I have a feeling that I might be ever so slightly lost. The day I did this, there were 30 miles of visibility. Now we're not even legal for VFR, so please don't blame me. Okay. Google on phone. Uh-oh, 3% of battery. I better be quick. Fort Macleod Airport. Please tell me, please tell me, please tell me, please tell me. Unparalleled professionalism. What do you mean you're not gonna... Oh, that's what it is. Okay, now I remember. Ha 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 ha. Charlie, Echo, Yankee, 3, Fort Macleod. Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. Take me back to the friggin' page. Enter. Oh, I pressed the wrong button. Okay. GPS. GPS. What do you mean you're not? Uh-oh. Oh, no. Okay. I'll just turn to a heading. Oh, yes. Okay. I should have done a proper navlog for this, but it's Christmas. I can't be asked. I'm going to go to Fort Macleod, and I'm going to do it extremely unprofessionally. And now I'm going to go over the add-ons that I'm using. So obviously, the gorgeous A2A Simulations Cessna 172. And if I'm not mistaken, I have a little texture thing that gives winter clothing to all your crew and passengers. And I'm using a paint scheme. Actually, I don't remember who made this. There will be a link in the description for all of this stuff. The scenery I'm using is ORBX Northern Rockies, which gives us scenery. Actually, the coverage ends like just over there, but we can't see that through the fog, so that's all good. And so yeah, ORBX Northern Rockies. The weather, I'm using Rex Overdrive and Rex Soft Clouds. And what else am I using? I'm also using AccuFeel, although because we're flying an A2A aircraft, that's probably not going to be terribly noticeable. So that's about it. Add-on wise, I'm going to make sure I'm actually running the cruise power that I want to. Ooh. We're running 2400 RPM, which is the upper end of the cruise envelope, but that's okay. I actually want to get there expediently, and I don't really care how much fuel we burn, because it's a simulator. I don't have to pay for it. And where is my exhaust gas temperature? Because I want to lean the mixture a trifle more precisely. Is it behind this? Oh no, it's not. It's right there. So yeah, it was kind of behind it. So I'll just put that GPS away for a second. I'll lean and see what it does. Okay. Still creeping up. Oh, and there it is. There's my peak right there. So I will actually enrich that a little bit so that we're a bit rich a peak for best power. And we are on our way. And when I did this flight in reality, there was a lot more to see because the visibility was not terrible. Also, I think the paint scheme I have installed for this aircraft changes the cabin upholstery because it's not blue. Someone actually did a scheme for the A2A Cessna 182, which I considered using, which adds fancy Christmas. It looks like the inside's upholstered with garish Christmas sweaters, basically. And the whole thing was painted to be very, very Christmassy. I considered using it for this, but I wanted to do it in a 172 because when I flew this for reals, I did it in a 172. So that's all good. Oh, yes. I actually have a paper map on my desk in front of me because I actually have the chart for this area. Which is good, but there's also one you can bring up in the aircraft. And also, what's my cabin temperature? It's cold. Well, I can't be having that. Let's turn on the cabin heat. Oh yeah, full on. Cabin air, cabin heat, and my defroster is on. So cabin is warming rapidly. We're gonna be roasty toasty in here. It's all gonna be good. I'll pop my GPS back up, actually. And right now I only have the beacon light on. I'll go ahead and turn my navigation light on just for the sake of visibility, because it's not very good, and we want to make sure that we can be seen, theoretically. There's not actually any AI traffic running. And also we're going to monitor 121.5, just in case there are any aircraft in distress, per se. Not that there are going to be. How far are we? 17 minutes! I don't know if I can gab for that long. I might have to cut the video at some point. Until then, I'm going to try and see if I could find a landmark. Which is obviously what I was planning to do in the first place, but the visibility is so bad. Oh, there's the highway. Okay. So yeah, now we're crossing over the highway. I know vaguely where we are. So, occasionally we would make position reports on 126.7, but I would only do that if I knew exactly where I was. And the distance... Okay, so in that case, we could say that we're 32 nautical miles from Fort Macleod, but that doesn't really help anyone. So for now, we are going to remain quiet as a tomb. And I will get to talking on matters of importance for the YouTube channel on which you are watching this. Unless you're that weird Russian website that embedded one of my videos somewhere. Yeah, I looked at the playback sources and I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of a thing. But I don't know, stuff I want to do. I want to finish the Blinding Sun campaign, because it's been going for over a year, and I haven't done very many episodes, which is kind of appalling, but I think it's only 20 or 25 missions, and I think we might get a Yak one eventually in that campaign. I'm not sure why I think that. I might have read it in the description of the campaign. I'm not sure. After I finish that, I want to do another IL-2 campaign. I might do another Soviet one. I'm thinking about doing a Japanese one, or at least something in the Pacific. So I will keep people posted on that, and I'd certainly be open to suggestions. In the way of Rise of Flights, well, being as that's sort of an Iron Man campaign, it's going to keep going until I die, and it's actually going to be a proper death next time. I'm just going to let it happen instead of taking advantage of a weird thing happening to the save file. But I don't know, I'd kind of like to make it to the end of the war. It could happen, but probably not. I'm probably going to try to do another low-level bombing mission soon, and probably end up getting my fanny shot down. But that's just how it goes, I suppose, in Rise of Flight. It tend not to last too long. And on the Stalker front, I'm enjoying doing that. It's not getting a huge amount of viewers, but I'll keep doing it. And that'll probably take, let's see, how many episodes am I into that? think part 8 just went up fairly recently. It's probably going to end up being maybe 20 or 30 at the most, so that will be coming. Well, there will be a steady stream of that pretty much, because I can record that quite often and easily and conveniently. So that's all good. What else is there for me to gab about? I might get back into Silent Hunter 3, or at least one of the Silent Hunter games. I might do 4 at some point, probably after I finish Stalker, actually. And now I'm going to waffle about how this leg of the trip went when I did it for reals. So essentially, a lot of it was following that number 2 highway. So you fly over the town of Nanton, which, among other things, has it has the Bomber Command Museum of Canada, where they have a Lancaster, and I think they have 3 of the engines running now, which is all good. It also has a gigantic candy shop and a model railway museum, which I think it's still there anyway. And that's just about all the town has to offer. But I only flew over it. I didn't stop that. And then after that, there's the town of Staveley, which we're probably pretty close to right now, which has absolutely bugger all. And then from there is pretty much a straight shot to Fort Macleod, for all I know. I'm going to consult my map. Oh, and then there's Claresholm. We might actually be able to see the Claresholm airport when we pass it. In fact, it might be down on our right here quite shortly. I can't see it, but I think it's there, because it's showing an NDB on the GPS, and it just so happens that there's one right next to the Claresholm Airport. In fact, I will go ahead and tune it just for giggles. It is 408. And we'll see if it works. Yeah, and the ADF's got it. There is not a beacon at Fort Macleod, so we're just gonna have to trust our GPS, which is better than just having to trust your capacity to navigate, which I'm actually very good at when there's actually VFR flight conditions. But that's okay. So yeah, on that cross-country that I did, the first leg was obviously High River to Fort Macleod, then I went to Bassano, and then back to High River. It was about 2.5 hours all told of flying time, and it's not terribly scenic. Actually, the first leg is the most scenic. Actually, the second one was pretty good, but because there were a bunch of lakes that you get to fly over. But I'm only doing the first leg in this video, because it needs to be a reasonably manageable length, let's say. Which is all good. Let's see if we can spot Claresholm. Well, there's the town. The airport... Nope, not in view, which means our visibility is practically nil, which means if we were doing this in the real world, it would not be legal. But that's okay, it's a simulator. We could assume that we have an IFR rating in this hypothetical universe. And so, our circuit height in Fort Macleod is going to be 4,100 feet. The wind is probably still going to be out of the east, which puts us in a pretty good position for landing. And I already have the frequency tuned up for it, which is all good. And we're going to be starting our descent in about maybe 5 minutes. And then we're going to land. Well, first thing we'll do is cross over the field and sneak a peek at the windsock and make sure that the wind is doing what we want it to. Don't mind me, I've been fiddling with a pair of tweezers on my desk. I don't know why. Oh yeah, there are, in terms of terrain obstacles to worry about, there are some wind turbines to the south of Fort Macleod that we want to keep an eye on, and it's right-hand circuits for some of the runways to make sure that you're always on the south side of the field so that you're not flying over the town, because then people complain, and when people complain, terrible things happen to airports that people complain about. So we will make sure that we don't give them any reason to complain. And there is also a hospital helipad not too far away from the airport. And there should be no conflict because helicopters going in and out of there will be at low level, and I can't imagine it happens very much because it's a small town. So, unless something really bad happened to someone. Ooh. Horizon. Maybe can we see it now? Oh, yeah, there it is. You can sort of just see it. It's a triangular shaped field. There are lots of triangular airports in this part of the country because there were a lot of triangular airports that were built for the Commonwealth Air Training Plan during World War II, so they would train pilots in Canada so that they would be very far away from combat zones. But because it was very rural, they could simulate night flying over blacked out areas and things of that nature. And it just so happens a lot of those airfields are still standing, or at least in part. Often when they were originally built, they would have just been dirt runways that you'd have things like Harvards and Anthons flying out of. But that's all well and good. Except for the fact that the airport in the city of Calgary, which is where I'm actually sitting recording this, where I live, and the airport in Calgary is a little bit ridiculous because it was originally built during World War II and it's been gradually expanded ever since, and there's never been a coherent plan to how it's been expanded. So the terminal building is an absolute mess because it was an airport that just happened. No one actually planned it per se, unlike an airport like, say, LAX, which was built by someone with a brain in their heads, which is actually quite efficient, although I've only been there once. And Las Vegas is actually quite well laid out. So we should be, now that we're only about 10 nautical miles out, we should have passed the town of Woodhouse by now and fly over the town of Granham. For Pete's sake, who names towns around here? And there will be a lake off to the right called Mud Lake, which is just lovely. Or something. Not lovely, it's probably full of mud. Because a lot of the lakes around here are more swamps than anything which could be adequately described as a lake. But now that we are... oh no, we're 13 miles out. We're gonna switch to Fort Macleod traffic, and at this point we might shoot them a quick advisory, say, you know, we're 13 miles to the... we are 13 miles to the northwest, inbound for landing. Estimate we'll be on the ground in about... probably about maybe 8 minutes, because we can add a little time to that for flying the circuit for landing. So we would let them know so that if there's any traffic, they sort of just keep that in the back of their heads. Of course there isn't any traffic because I'm not using AI traffic in an effort to improve the frame rate, is essentially why I have done that, because FSX with add-ons is something I really have to whip into shape to get to run well enough to record, but it's running a constant 30 frames per second, so I'm not complaining. Yes, there is no ATIS for Fort Macleod, so we'll have to just go with the altimeter setting that we had to begin with. I'm going to adjust my heading bug just a little bit because we're slightly off course. I feel kind of bad that the visibility is as bad as it is, because I really wanted to do this with some amount of professionalism, but it's basically impossible to do VFR navigation in conditions like this, even when you have the highway to navigate by, which is what makes this leg so easy. But you know, you can't have it all, and well, I didn't have to use real world weather, come to think of it, but I wanted to, so I did. We probably can just about see Mud Lake over there. Nope, not yet. Because the visibility is rubbish. We will peek out the window though. Oh, what's down here? Why, hello. It's probably a farm of some description. Because this area is heavy on the agricultural side. In fact, over by Brooks, there are some crop circles, or at least irrigation systems which resemble crop circles. Well, yeah. There's actually quite a lot of those, and they are very strange to see from the air. You might get the impression that someone's keeping something from you, but rest assured no one is. So now we might make another radio call, say that we are 8 nautical miles to the northwest, inbound for landing, estimate on the ground in maybe 5 minutes. And also, we are now going to start our descent, so I'm going to disengage the autopilot. And I'll bring the power back to 2000 RPM. And we'll do a at least partially power on descent at about 500 feet per minute, maybe a little more. Just to get us down. We want to cross over the field for the first wind check. We want to be 500 feet above circuit height, so we'll descend to 4,500. And we will cross over the field as soon as we can actually see the bloody thing. We're anticipating wind out of the east, so we are probably going to make a right-hand circuit to the south. I can't even see the sodding airport yet. 3 minutes to go, yeah. 2000 RPM, descending at a fairly sedate rate, but I want to keep the speed up. So that we actually get there in a timely manner. I've actually done a power on descent at 2300 RPM in a 172 where it goes up to about 120 knots. And you start hearing the wind noise flowing over the thing at that speed, and if you open this here cabin vent up here, you get quite a lot of air coming through that. There are those crop circles I was talking about, but don't worry, they're only an agricultural irrigation system, or so we've been told. I assure you, this country is not nearly interesting enough to have secrets like that. Although we have had some weird things. That now is not the time to discuss such matters. Ooh, Mud Lake. Mud Lake. Oh, I think that's it. Yeah. Oh no, that's just the river. Whatever. Altitude's coming down, except we've leveled off for some reason, because I'm not paying attention, because I'm recording. And I have noticed a definite deficit of attention when I'm actually recording something, and it does, Hey! Are we gonna get to keep this, or is that just what the weather ejection is doing? Because Rex is not as subtle as it could be when it comes to that. No, I think we get to keep this. Which is good, because now we have the runway in sight. That's really good. So, why couldn't I have had this visibility before? So this is great. There's the town of Fort Macleod. Yeah, this all looks familiar. Oh, this is great. And I can see the airport buildings. It's a little windy, but nothing to squeal at. I'm gonna put my charge away. Ah! Ah, level off. Let go of the stick to pick up a bloody... Ah! Level off. Trim, 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 trim. There we go. So, to set power as desired, mixture. We should enrich it a little bit, because I leaned it for cruise. Altimeter, we can't really set it. There is no ATIS here. Elevator trim is good. Mixture is set. Yeah. Fuel selector, both. Flaps, we won't be setting the flaps yet. But what we are going to do is start looking for the windsock. Where is it? Come on. I think I know where it is, but... you always say something like that. Put away the GPS. Where is the windsock? Oh! Oh! Winds are favoring landing on runway 24. Okay, that means we need to descend right now so that we can join the, oh no, not runway 24. Yes, runway 24. We need to descend right now so that we can join the, circuit, which is good. So 4,100 feet. We'll bring the power back up. And I have kind of neglected the radio, so right now we'd say Fort Macleod traffic, Yankee Victor Juliet is overhead the field, joining left downwind, runway 24. And there are no really good landmarks to make your circuit here, so I'm just gonna wing it, kind of. I'll make my turn now to the reciprocal of 240, which is 060. And I would get on the radio and say, Fort Macleod traffic, Yankee Victor Juliet is established left downwind, runway 24, full stop. Now, when I did this for my actual cross country, I only did a touch and go here, but we're actually going to land, which is all well and good. So now the runway is getting to the point where it's just about 45 degrees behind us. We will bring the power back to about 1700 RPM, and we'll start our turn onto base, and I'll just hold us level until the airspeed gets into the white arc, which it is now in, and we'll extend 20 degrees of flaps, and we'll trim for 65 knots for base and final. So now we're on base and descending at a reasonable pace. Airspeed's a little bit low, so I'm going to lower the nose and then increase the power so that we maintain our rate of descent. And that'll get it up back through 65 knots. And we would say Fort Macleod traffic, Yankee Victor Juliet, is on left base, runway 24, full stop. 244 full stop, if you will. The language gets a little bit garbled when you do that. And now we will pass over the south end of the town, where hopefully the not complainy people live. And we have not really descended as much as we should have, but that's okay because the downwind was a little longer than it should have been, so it's okay that we have a little more altitude. It means that we get approximately the glide slope that we want. And I made that turn a little early, so I will keep going this way until we are in a position to line up with the runway. Still holding 65 knots, we're all good, we're trimmed. We would say Fort Macleod traffic, Yankee Victor Juliet is on final, runway 24, full stop. And now we can bring the power back a little bit. So we'll keep the power on, maintain our rate of descent and speed, and once we know we're going to make the runway, we'll bring it back to idle, and we'll start our flare, aiming hopefully for just over the numbers. Is going to be where we start our flare. And then we'll just backtrack and taxi in, shut down, and I will bid farewell. Unfortunately, there's a crosswind, so we need to crab a little bit, but we're going to make the runway, so power's back to idle. And airspeed's coming back through 60 knots. And I'm going to start my flare. You want to do a 2-point landing in a... Oh, there we are. That was pretty good. You want to do a 2-point landing in a 172 because it has a fairly small and delicate nose wheel, so you don't want to plow that into the ground too hard. And we're stopping. Flaps are coming up. And I would say Fort Macleod traffic, Yankee Victor Juliet, backtracking runway 24. Whew! And the weather is kind of interesting. It's sort of early evening as I record this. When I did the actual flight, it was the morning. Alright. And when we're about halfway back, we might say again, Fort Macleod traffic, Yankee Victor Juliet, backtracking runway 24. Because it never hurts to make sure that someone who might be about to land, who's not paying very much attention, to know that there is someone on the runway. And we'll just slow down. And we'll turn off. And as we cross over the hold line, we would say Fort Macleod traffic, Yankee Victor Juliet, down and clear, taxiing to the ramp. And where are we gonna park? Right there. In that convenient little spot. Cessna 172, you don't get a huge amount of authority with the nose wheel steering. You need a little differential braking to make the tight corners. Even more so in the older models, which is obviously what I've been flying in the real world. And let's see if I can put this right about where it needs to be. Oh, we're a little bit ahead, but that's okay. So, we're stopped. Parking brake is on. Electrical equipment, autopilot, avionics, all that stuff is going off. We'll bring the power back to idle, mixture, idle cutoff, mags off, master off. And here we are. Welcome to Fort Macleod. This has been my somewhat unprofessional yet zany and hilarious Christmas special. Or whatever you want to call it. It's not particularly Christmassy, but I wanted to have something where it was a somewhat long video where I got to gab about stuff that I want to do in the coming year before I do yet another crappy Christmas special. So, I think that's about all I was going to say. So yeah, welcome to Fort Macleod, Merry Christmas, and or other holidays, secular or otherwise. Toodaloo, I think that's all. Bye!